Gaspar, Melchior, Balthazar, the Magi. The word comes from Latin. It's the word that gives us the word magic and magician, the Magi. The origin of their names are Arabic, Indian, and Ethiopian. Indeed, the city you may have heard of in Afghanistan, Kandahar, comes from Casper. These exotic creatures arrived in Jerusalem with stories of having seen a star, the natural phenomenon, the object of their study, which could mean for them only that a new king had been born. And as they arrived, all Jerusalem began to stir. Jerusalem was a minor capital in the Roman Empire, a place not much considered important or vital to the Roman overseers, but in its place, the center of culture and life. And when they arrived, of course, it was a place where exotic people from time to time came to. After all, in the period before Jesus' birth, for 100 years or so, the Jewish communities in every major Roman city had begun to explode in membership. And these exotic people from exotic places made their way to Jerusalem on their own. But here were these men, pagan, who had come to Jerusalem with stories of a king. Of course, natural phenomenon will only get you so far. Studying what is revealed in nature brings us only to the precipice. There is not enough yet to know whether to jump or not. And so they stopped to consult those wise in Revelation about what they should do, where they should go. And so they stopped and asked the obvious question: where in your knowledge is the king to be born? And so Herod gathered the experts around and asked. And without hesitation, they answered. It's obvious and clear to those who know the revelation that the answer is Bethlehem. The kings, the Magi, go off, and all of those around Herod, whom he had summoned to give the answer, all of them went back to bed. They stayed behind. It was of no interest to them to go to Bethlehem, to the place where the new king was. The Magi had a couple of advantages that the rabbis didn't. The rabbis, of course, knew that any interest that they evinced in the new king would put them in bad odor with the old king. And so it was a good investment to stay behind, to have no interest in what would be coming next. Their lives, after all, were intricately woven into the life of the old king. They had the advantage of knowing their place, the disadvantage of knowing that it was their place and they could be replaced. The Magi had the advantage, of course, because they were on an exotic journey. For years, they had pursued this object of their knowledge and had been pulled forward on this exotic journey to this exotic place. They had the advantage of being on pilgrimage, where the journey is the object of the destination. They easily made their way. And the other disadvantage of the rabbis is that Bethlehem is 7 miles from Jerusalem. There's nothing exotic about going to a small town out of the capital. There's nothing there for them. Nothing exotic, nothing strange, nothing new. And just because someone from somewhere else wants to know about a king doesn't make going to the king all that interesting. As Father Macaulay used to say, the Epiphany of the Lord is our holiday. Christmas is for the Jews. That's when Jesus comes among his people. Epiphany is for us when Jesus comes among the pagans. The Magi went. And so the Magi found the king, and all of Jerusalem stayed home, even Herod, because they all had better things to do than to go over and follow strangers to a familiar place. That's why often Revelation catches fire amidst the poor and the immigrant more than those who are staid and connected, because those people aren't invested in the present and they don't have anything better to do than to follow what is new and to come to the future. In fact, this truth in our age is everywhere. One of the most powerful forces, currents in our current religious conversation is prompted by a psychologist who isn't a believer, but in all of the years of his clinical practice and of his wide reading can describe the scientific concerns about the dissolution of our personalities in our contemporary society. And he has found in the scriptures, and in fact has written extensively about how those scriptures provide us with a gateway into assembling and coming to the fullest potential in the problems that we encounter in our lives today. A psychologist who's not a believer, whose appreciation of natural phenomena brings him to the revelation, which then he understands points to the far other side, the fullness of life and wholeness and goodness. It's as if the kings arrived and went on to see what so many of the others haven't seen. He's fascinated and enlivened by what is offered there because it guides him precisely in the direction that he's led by what he sees. It's like the kings all over again. So what is the story for us? First of all, we should look around. The world is exploding with its hunger for meaning and purpose. There has never been a time when people have had so much and have had so much comfort has been available to them, and in which so many have been connected to the story of the world. But the story that we share is of despair and confusion and grief. The number one cause of death in the world is abortion. The world is hungry for meaning and desperate for purpose. And the star is shining. The gift of Christ has been given everywhere. Everywhere people are looking for how to forgive, how to be forgiven, and how to find redemption. All the talk that has gone on in our society for a generation about racism, about DEI, about privilege, about political upheaval, people crossing borders all over the world in numbers never before recorded in human history. All of this is a way to find an answer to how to forgive, how to be forgiven, and how to find redemption. Who will forgive us, and how will our lives matter in the face of sin and falsehood? That's alive everywhere in every human heart. All we have to do is turn on TV to see it. It is the opportunity, reading the signs of knowing what's happening, and to know that the revelation we have received is for this moment in human history, for us. And since this is our moment, then what we must do is be in motion. The Magi went, and the rabbis didn't. Our invitation is to go, but to the really courageous destination, like the Magi did, on a pilgrimage ourselves. Perhaps, though, a pilgrimage to the near and the familiar, because the journey is still the destination, where the world is dying for lack of a king, to those places perhaps near to us, in homes without fathers, in jails and in prisons, amongst education without soul, amongst the aged without care or compassion. Our invitation is to go. Sure, there are those places that are boiling in upheaval, in Russia and Ukraine and Gaza and China and Burma, but also in all these other places, waiting for a king to be recognized there. The invitation isn't that different than it was in Jerusalem all those years ago, where our eyes are being directed and our souls being invited, that our lives, filled with the promise that is poised and filled with the promise of the revelation that we've been given, that this is the moment when the King born among us is to be revealed to all the nations, especially to us.